They don't pay us to think. They pay us to know. We know we can beat them. There's no excuses why we shouldn't. Win the game, period. W is on 3, man. Let's go. W on 3. 1, 2, 3, W.
Welcome, all my fellow Redskin brethren and sister. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the Redskins Report Live. Reaction to the 2018 NFL Draft, and I'm going to see if we get any feedback on this particular video, and if you guys want to discuss this Redskins draft and what we were able to do. And so I'm going to open up Twitter. I'm going to have that available. I'm going to be reading your comments, and if you guys want to call in, there's the number. You can do so. So the floor is yours. Let me open up this comment section. And here we go. So Twitter's open for business. And we got a couple comments. Deshaun Drakeford says, see if I can't get my Twitter right there. What do y'all think the record is going to be this year? Playoff or what? I don't know about all of that. You know, it's way too early to be predicting records. I'm not in the business of predicting records. I even hate doing it as we get closer to the year, but I do it just because it's an exercise that everyone likes to participate in. But I'm not really one for records and trying to predict what you're going to do, because we don't know who's going to be good, who's not going to be good. So it's all but impossible to figure these types of things out. So I don't know what to expect from this team. I don't even know what to expect from Alex Smith in the offense. You know, in past years, we've been able to sort of predict what we were going to get out of Kirk Cousins, and we knew what we were going to get there. We're not even sure about what the offense is going to be this year, you know. So health is a big key. We saw that last year. When we were healthy, we were a good football team, at least good enough to be competitive. You're not healthy, and sometimes that's what determines how good you are. I mean, you look at the Rams. They were one of the best teams in the NFC last year because they stayed healthy. So you never know. Mo Els says, you think Jay Gruden will still abandon running the ball now that we have Geis? I think Jay's trying to remain balanced, man. I'll give Jay credit. I think he doesn't get enough credit for trying to remain. I don't like the way they run the ball with that damn duo play, with that dive that they do, that quick hitting dive up the middle, which our tight ends never block, and plays get blown up in the backfield. But I can't sit here and act as if Jay doesn't try to run the football, because he's actually tried to remain balanced despite the lack of success we've had. And you even saw when we had success, what did Jay do? That game against the Rams where we were gutting them, what did Jay do? We ran it down their throats in that game. So I think that Jay's going to run it, and he's been running it. So Matthew123 says, I think Trey Quinn is going to be the new Ryan Grant, but better. From a standpoint of fluidity, he's just better than Ryan Grant. Ryan Grant wasn't fluid to me. But I think that's who the Ryan Grant replacement is. I agree with that. He's got a roster spot because he's essentially taking the roster spot that was vacated from Ryan Grant. I think that's a pretty fair assessment to make. I agree with that, Gregory. Or Matthew, excuse me. I agree with that. Gregory Lightbody says, what do you think of Simi Cobbs, and do you think he will make the team? So I have a list of guys. I'm going to get my list out right now. I have a list that I made of Redskins that are free agent, undrafted free agents that the Redskins brought on board that I think have the best shot of making the roster. Here they are. UVA safety Quinn Blanding, who I thought would get drafted. I didn't think he would go undrafted. Indiana wide receiver Simi Cobbs Jr. has a chance to make the roster. NC State linebacker Jared Fernandez, put his first and last name together, and Iowa guard Sean Welsh are all guys that I think have a shot, a realistic and legitimate shot at making this roster. I thought for sure 3 of those 4 guys would get drafted. I thought Simi Cobbs, we saw a lot of teams taking a flyer, a 7th round flyer on these big receivers. And I thought Simi Cobbs would be one of those guys that heard his name called in the 7th round. I thought Quinn Blanding would get a sniff from someone, 6th or 7th round. Highly productive safety out of the ACC. I was wrong. And Sean Welsh was a guy that I talked about on day 2 of the draft that I said at some point Sean Welsh is going to hear his name called as an interior offensive lineman out of Iowa. And, you know, they coach him up well at Iowa. And I thought he would get a sniff, and he didn't. So those are 4 guys that I look at and say, look, if they come in, they take to coaching, they stay healthy, they got a legitimate shot at cracking this roster. Now, who do you dismiss from the roster? Welsh, to me, has the biggest chance out of all of those guys to make the roster, because you look around at the interior offensive line and you say, who's stopping him from making this roster? After your 2 starters, and we still don't even know who the starter at left guard is. After you look at your 2 starters, and we still don't know who the other one is, who's stopping him from making the roster? We don't have any interior guys that are locks to make this roster. Ari Kwanjo isn't a lock. Who's the guy that they liked last year? Kyle Kalis. He's not a lock to make this roster. So Sean Welsh, to me, if he comes in, takes the coaching, shows them some of the technique that he used and some of the things he's learned under the Ferentz brothers at Iowa, he's got a shot to make this roster. As far as Simi Cobbs is concerned, he's got a shot just to make it from his size. Who he's going to fight over a roster spot with is Brian Quick. We re-signed Brian Quick, who had a couple of big catches in that Seattle game last year. That was really his one shining moment for us. He's back in the mix. Same type of body size. Cobbs is a little bit bigger than that of Brian Quick. But if Quick is able to outlast the rookie, then Quick will make the roster and Simi Cobbs won't. Well, both of them won't make the roster. There's only space for one big body receiver. And if Cobbs can come in and show that he's dedicated on special teams, he may be able to win that final roster spot at the receiver position. John Perez says, what the hell was the deal with this cheerleading scandal? It's disgusting, if you ask me. I have no idea how true it is and what the validity of it is. But if there's any merit to this, shame on the Redskins organization, shame on Daniel Snyder, and it is repulsive. And it's part of the reason why he doesn't have a good rap. You know, it's these types of stories, why this organization as a whole has been looked upon as bottom feeders in this league. We don't do business well. You saw the USA Today article that talked about the Redskins. They polled over 20 different scouts or agents, and they asked who was the least prepared of the teams you deal with. Who's the least prepared? And Bruce Allen and the Redskins were number 1. They said, who's the toughest to deal with? You know, who's the worst you've got to deal with? The Redskins were number 3 on that list. You know, and so it just goes to show you we don't have a good image around league circles. You saw how we handled the Scott McCloughan situation. You saw how we handled the Kirk Cousins situation. We don't do things the right way. So this story doesn't surprise me, but it doesn't make me any less disappointed. It's disgusting, and it's exactly what you don't want to hear from the team that you root for on Sundays. So, Rodney Ray says, I feel that we're going to have a bumpy road ahead of us on our pass defense, but I feel like we'll be 10 when it comes to run defense if healthy. I think our run defense has gotten better exponentially with the picks of Daron Payne and Tim Settle. I, like you, still want to know where the pass rush is coming from. Now, I will say this. When we were healthy last year, we were generating pressure. All right? We were collapsing the pocket, and we were getting to the quarterback. Jonathan Allen and Matt Ioannidis were playing their asses off, and that made it easier for guys like Ryan Kerrigan and Preston Smith to get to the quarterback as well when you're collapsing the pocket from within. So we'll see if we can duplicate that again. We'll see. James J says, HTTR, love this draft. AAA, my favorite pick was Tim Settle in the 5th round. I think a lot of people love that selection. I think a lot of people felt like that solidified this draft. When you doubled down on the defensive line, allowed you to cut bait with some dead weight in defensive linemen that we got out of Dallas and Terrell McClain and also A.J. Francis. It allowed you to really solidify what we have up front. Gives you a real rotation of guys that belong in this league that you feel like can make a difference up front. And I didn't think we would get Settle after we didn't take him in the 4th. I thought that was our last opportunity to get him. And I was shocked when we came around and he was still on the board in the 5th. And I was so pleased that the Redskins understood what was sitting right in front of them and decided to pull the trigger on him as well. See if we got something on Twitter. Let's see. Got a tweet from my man, Big Sean. Says, I'm not a Redskins fan. Can't wait to hear you rant again tonight on the Redskins Report. Not a rant. I'm totally fine now. That's over with. I said what I needed to say. The family responded. Some people agreed with me. Some didn't, which is what I expected, and we move on, you know. Dre True Statement says, what's up, Lou? Been missing your content because of work and just watched the playback of your draft party. I knew you would be upset when you heard y'all got paid. I was very upset at the time. I've since cooled off. I've moved on, and like I said, I don't hate the player. I just hated the decision. That's all. You know, it's nothing against Payne. And for those of you who thought that I said Payne wasn't going to be good, I never said that. I just think he's a guy that doesn't have as high a ceiling as some of the other guys that were available at 13. But again, that's behind us. We've moved forward. And so Brian says, I loved moving down in the 2nd round to get a 3rd rounder, but I really hoped we would use that 3rd rounder to get a guard. Do you think we're going to try Nsekhe at guard? So that's the word out. I listened to Doug Williams talk, and he sounds like Nsekhe could be an option at guard. I've listened to Ty Nsekhe himself say and allude to the fact that he may be playing guard this year. Morgan Moses did an interview that I heard where he said, hey, don't be surprised if Ty Nsekhe kicks inside. So I'm starting to hear this more and more. It's starting to gain traction, and I'm starting to believe that this could actually come to fruition. Remember, as Redskins fans, you remember that Giants game in 2016 that we had on the road in which we had an injury at guard. That was the first game that Sean Laval got hurt, and we didn't have any backup there. And so we had to kick Trent down inside, and Nsekhe came in at tackle. And that was the first time we started playing around with the idea of maybe Ty Nsekhe kicking inside the guard. And, like, could he do it? He's so big, he's so long, and generally you don't want that kind of length inside at guard. It's not conducive. That being said, we'll see, man. Nsekhe, when Scott McCloughan was here, he said that Ty Nsekhe was one of the best 5 offensive linemen that we had. So I want to see if the Redskins are going to get their best 5 linemen on the field at once. And we'll see if we do that. But I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens with this Redskins football team from that standpoint. I think everyone is kind of anxiously awaiting the decision that they make at guard. And maybe Nsekhe isn't the option at guard, but if Nsekhe is in fact the guy that they're looking at guard, it makes sense from this standpoint. That's why you draft Jerron Christian. Again, never trust a guy with 2 first names. Never trust a man with 2 first names, but that's why you draft a guy like Christian that is a swing tackle that played both left and right tackle at Louisville. and you look to develop him because you may have the idea that you're going to kick a guy inside, like a Inseki. And remember, Inseki is currently our swing tackle. So if you have thoughts of grandeur of kicking Inseki inside, you need a new swing tackle, hence the selection of Jerron Christian. So it seems like the dots are starting to line up and they're starting to connect. At Checkmate 21 says, Sean Welsh signed today to the roster and Orlando Franklin was cut. I already told you, those 4 guys that I named, those are the 4 guys that I think have a realistic shot of making the Redskins roster. I really do. So Sean Welsh is a guy that I thought was going to get drafted. So if you ask me, it wouldn't shock me if Sean Welsh not only made this roster, but at some point in 2018 ended up taking starter reps. That wouldn't shock me at all. So we'll see. But we move on. Dre True Statement says, Welsh and Cobb not being drafted was absurd. Good pickups from y'all. I agree wholeheartedly. I won't say it's absurd that they weren't drafted. It just was surprising. I'd say that much. Sean Mack says, I must be higher on Payne than you, bro. You are. And again, it's not that I don't love Payne. It's just, again, I thought there were other players on the board at the time that could bring something to the table that we currently lacked. That's all. That's the only thing that I was trying to express. John Perez says, I'm going to be honest. The Jerron Christian pick puzzled me because we could have had Ronnie Harrison in the 3rd, but if he's good at protecting the blind spot, I'll take him. Ronnie Harrison, if you weren't going to take a safety in the 1st round when you had a chance to take Derwin James, then there was no need to take Ronnie Harrison in the 3rd when you still had other players. Because like I told you, the 1st round for me is all about best player available. If you're picking in the top 20, that means you didn't make the playoffs. If you're picking in the 2nd and 3rd and even 4th round, now you're looking to fit needs. Best player available that fits a need. Now I'm more so looking for a guy that can come in, make my roster, and help me right away at a position where I need the most help. I'm not necessarily looking for just strictly best player available. Sometimes there's a player sitting there and you're looking around at everyone in the room like, why is this guy still here? He has no business being here. We had a 1st round grade on him. We had a top 20 grade on him. Let's take him. And you may not need him, but just because he was sitting there, you're like, what is this guy still doing here? We got to take him. You take him. But for the most part, in the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th round, I'm looking for best player available meets biggest need. And those two collide, and you take the guy that fits that criteria. So at that point, Ronnie Harrison, he didn't meet. He may have met the best player available criteria, but he didn't meet the best player available and fits a need criteria. Okay? So Jerron Christian did, especially if these rumors that are starting to circulate that are floating around that Ty Nsekhe may play guard, if that is in fact true, then that Jerron Christian pick becomes that much more important. Matthew123 says, do you think Gruden will use Geis and CT in 2 back sets? I don't think so. When have we ever seen Gruden use 2 back sets with 2 different backs of that kind of caliber on the field at once? I don't even recall him doing that in Cincinnati when he was the offensive play caller there. So I don't think that's in his DNA to put those 2 guys on the field at the same time. I think they're going to be on the field exclusively. I don't think you're going to see both of those guys on the field often. You may see it every now and again. I don't think that's the case, though. I don't see the Redskins doing that. I think you're going to see either one or the other on the field. I don't think he's going to use them in that capacity. But I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. Because I think both of those guys on the field presents problems. And you don't know who's going to get the football. So we'll see. Cloud says, Weird how those big receivers fell in the draft like Equanimous St. Brown and Simi Cobbs who went undrafted. It's not weird because I told you during my combine breakdown that a lot of these bigger receivers were going to have trouble separating. Equanimous St. Brown didn't have the production at Notre Dame, and a lot of what you had to do with him was project. And it's not his fault that the quarterbacking was terrible at Notre Dame, really, for the duration of his career. But nonetheless, there wasn't a lot of production there. There wasn't a lot on tape that said, hey, take this guy in the second or the third or the fourth. He had to wait until Green Bay decided to snatch him up in, I believe it was the 6th round. And a guy like Simi Cobbs, I told you, he doesn't run good routes. You know, he's primarily a back shoulder bully and a guy that you throw it up to and let him go get it. And so he doesn't separate well. And he had a major injury in college as well. So it didn't shock me. I did think someone would have taken a flyer on Cobbs at least. And, you know, we saw a lot of these bigger receivers have a flyer taken out on them. I was surprised he didn't have one taken out on him. But Skinny Wild says, our backfield is a little crowded. Someone has to go. Will it be Fat Rob or P. Ryan? P. Ryan isn't going anywhere. You don't spend a 3rd round pick on a guy and cut him the next year. They won't, even if they felt like they made a mistake, which drafting Geis this year and admitting that, yeah, we need to upgrade the running back position, it kind of admits that P. Ryan wasn't what you thought he was. He's still good enough, and he's still not a guy that you get rid of at this point. So Fat Rob is done, I think. If everybody's healthy, the backfield will look like this. Obviously, your starting 1st and 2nd down back is going to be Darius Geis. Then Chris Thompson is going to be your 3rd down back. And then you're going to have Samaje Perine in some short yardage situations and just spelling a guy like, Darius Geis when need be. If they want to carry a 4th running back, then there's a fight for that last spot between Rob Kelly. He's not Fat Rob anymore. He's not fat anymore. So Rob Kelly. Also, they like Capri Bibbs, who came on at the end of last year. And then don't forget about the guy they signed from the Eagles last year. Trying to think of his last name. Shucks. I can't think of his name, but you guys know who I'm talking about. That played for a couple of games until he hurt himself in practice. It was so bad for us. But we got a ton of backs. Those 3 will be fighting it out for that final running back spot if they decide to keep 4 backs. But got a long way to go before we get there. But I can assure you, P. Ryan is making the roster. Rodney Ray says, I feel that Jaron Christian pick was to reinforce the O-line. With Ty and Seki maybe moving the guard, we'll need a swing tackle. Jaron fits the bill. Exactly. Pretty much what we've been talking about all night. James J says, I'm calling it now. Catalina wins the left guard spot by the end of camp. I don't think that's going to be the case. I haven't heard anybody mention Tyler Catalina's name. Anytime they're talking about someone of the guys that were there last year, they keep bringing up Ari Kwanjo. So I think Kwanjo would get the first go at it. I don't think Catalina's the guy, honestly speaking. Daddy Smokes Yam says, Geis is a 3-down back, or does Chris Thompson still have a big role this year? Yep, Chris Thompson, still your 3rd down back. I mean, we saw how dynamic Chris Thompson was. There's no way they're taking that role away from him. Can Geis be on the field on 3 downs? I believe he can. And there's been this moving momentum for him as a guy that can catch it. I heard Doug Williams say that one of the most underrated parts of his game is his ability to catch it. They didn't throw it to him at LSU, but they said one of the things that they really wanted to see from him at his pro day was him catching it, and they thought that he caught it well enough for their liking as well. I thought he was one of the toughest pass protectors in the draft at the running back position. So from that standpoint, he can be on the field on 3rd downs. He's interchangeable with Chris Thompson, but they still are going to trust Thompson more to pick up blitz responsibilities. And they still want Thompson on the field to catch it, to be dynamic. So you're going to still see Thompson on the field. But Geis will be on the field in certain 3rd down situations. But Chris Thompson is still your 3rd down back. Redskins Pride says, have the Redskins moved away from Perine? No. Yes, From a starting first and second down back perspective, yes. No, as in terms of him not being on this roster. He's going to be on this roster, and he'll still get touches from time to time. They're not going to run Geis into the ground, but that being said, I can't see a game in which Chris Thompson and Darius Geis are healthy. I can't see a game that Perine has any more than 5 to 7 touches in any given game, especially being that he's not a good receiver. I can't see Perine having any kind of impact on the game other than a few scattered carries here and there. Buffalo pregame says, I heard that the Bengals are up first in the draft wrap-up series because they won a contest. What was that contest? It was my college basketball bracket busters challenge. And so the Bengals are, in fact, first. I think my man begged me for this, and I think I'm obliged. But my man BE won my winners and losers season-long football pool. And so he said, can he get his team up, the Cardinals? So I think I'm going to go Bengals, Cardinals, and then we'll let the mayhem begin afterwards. So, yes, that is the way it's going to start out. DMV Pride says, wish the Redskins went Edmonds or James this draft since next year is stacked with D lineman studs. You can't be assured that you're going to get your hands on one of those guys. And you don't, I don't like looking at minors. So I can't even tell you who's coming out. I know that the kid out of Houston is supposed to be a big time prospect, but I don't look at minors, man. You know, I stay away from that. If you're not eligible to be drafted, you're a minor. And if you're a minor, I'm no molester, man. I keep my eyes off of minors. So I can't even tell you. I just, after getting settled, it made that pick that much more tough to swallow, if you will. But nonetheless, John Perez says, you need to show me Tim Settle's birth certificate. 329 is big as hell, and only being 20 years old surprises me. Well, he's 20 years old, man. He's a pup. He's a puppy, man, for sure. Buffalo pregame says, are you excited at all about Simi Cobbs? At one point, he ranked fairly high on some top 100 lists. Yeah, I would say that it was a shock to me that he didn't get drafted from the standpoint of he's just a big body. And in this league where big body guys separate with the ability to just use their frame, I thought that he would have some value as a late round pick with somebody, anybody. And like I said, we saw about 4 or 5 late round guys come off the board. Dylan Cantrell came off the board from Texas Tech in the 7th round. And I'm looking around like, okay, if Dylan Cantrell can get a sniff and a look-see, you got to think that. Here, I'm going to pull up the 7th round quickly, and I guarantee you there's at least 4 or 5 big receivers, if I can remember correctly, that heard their name called in the 7th round, and I was shocked that Simi Cobbs wasn't one of them. So I'm pulling up the 7th round right now as we speak. And let's go through the picks, and I'll see if – so Javon Wims out of Georgia is a bigger receiver. Marcel Aitman is a big receiver. The Raiders pulled the trigger on him. Let's see. Auden Tate went in the 7th round. We know he's a big receiver. I actually wanted the Redskins to take a flyer on him. Austin Prohl is a bigger wide receiver out of North Carolina. And let's check this Middle Tennessee receiver, Richie James. See if he fits the bill as a bigger receiver. See how big this guy is. And Richie James, no, he's not a big receiver. But, so I just gave you 1, 2, 3, 4 big wide receivers that went in the final round. So I thought he would be one of them. And if you go to the 6th round, I just told you that Dylan Cantrell went in the later rounds. I think he went in the 6th round, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I'm doing all of this just to hammer home the point that Deion Kane went in the 6th round. He's a bigger receiver. Dylan Cantrell went to the Chargers in the 6th round. Equanimous St. Brown went in the 6th round. So did Cedric Wilson to the Cowboys. He's a bigger wide receiver. And so there's another 4 more bigger wide receivers that went in the 6th round. So you're talking 8 bigger receivers over the final 2 rounds, and Simi Cobbs couldn't get a sniff. So that was very, very surprising to me. So I'm excited about him, but I don't know what he brings to the table other than size. We're going to see if he can separate himself from a guy like Brian Quick, who I think he's competing with on this roster to make the 53-man roster. Reese says, would you say Geis is the most polarizing pick? Polarizing from what standpoint? If you're talking about from a off-the-field issue pick, polarizing-wise, yes. If you're talking about from do the fans love the pick, no. I would say that would be the first pick in pain. But polarizing will probably be the right word to use for Darius Geis because of the whole situation with Philadelphia that I don't think necessarily happened. Howie Roseman and Deuce Staley both came out and said, nah, that didn't really happen. I think his situation might have been a little overblown. And did that scare some teams away? Sure it did. I don't think he was the 7th best back in this draft. I think 6 backs were taken before him. If I recall correctly, obviously Barkley and both Sony Michel and Rashad Penny all went in the 1st round. Then Ronald Jones went to Tampa. Then you had Chubb go to the Browns. And you also had Kerryon Johnson go right before the Redskins. And there was a report that came out from Adam Schefter that said that the Redskins were planning on taking Kerryon Johnson with the 44th pick in the draft before the Lions traded up to 43 right in front of the Redskins. And remember, I made that comment, if you remember correctly, on the day 2 of the draft party that I thought the Lions must have come up in front of the Redskins because they got intel that the Redskins were sniffing around Kerryon Johnson. So I'm glad it happened, because if it didn't, maybe the Redskins pulled the trigger on Johnson, who I really like, but then you don't get the 3rd round pick in Jerron Christian. So kind of glad that did happen. But DMV Pride says, see, DMV Pride says, not unless Payne turns into a pass rush specialist. We could have had the same production from Tim Settle at the nose. Again, we don't want to beat a horse that's already dead. We've already made that point tonight. But, yes, that's part of the reason why I wasn't as high. Unless Payne starts to get pressure on the quarterback or at least affect the passing game, then – and, again, we couldn't have known the Redskins were going to get Tim Settle in the 5th. All right. I was going under the assumption that you were going to have to draft a Tim Settle or John Atkins or B.J. Hill in the 3rd, or excuse me, the 4th or the 2nd. Or you're going to have to trade back like the Redskins did, acquire a 3rd, and then make the selection in the 3rd. We're not privy to the intel that the Redskins were going to ultimately end up with Tim Settle sitting there in the 5th round. Obviously, hindsight is 20/20. Thank you, Cloud. Byron Marshall is the running back that I was thinking about. So it's a 3-man race at the running back position if the Redskins, in fact, are going to keep 4 running backs. Byron Marshall from Philadelphia, Capri Bibbs that we got late in the season from Denver, and then Rob Kelly. So in any event, Redskins Pride says Phil Taylor would be a blessing if nothing more than depth. I would love it. That would give us a 2-man rotation at nose, which you could definitely use. So I'd love it. We'll see what happens. Ravens fan says, does this draft put the Redskins in position to win the NFC East? No, I wouldn't go that far. Anything's possible, obviously. We haven't seen repeat winners in this division, excuse me, in quite some time. Eagles have a chance to be the first team to do it since the last time that it was done, which was coincidentally enough by those same Eagles back in 03-04. So it's been quite a while. You don't see repeat winners in this division very often. Can the Redskins sneak up? No one's giving the Redskins a chance. Can the Redskins sneak up and do some damage? This is when we're our most dangerous, when we're looked upon as nothing more than the doormat that everyone's supposed to step on to get W's. That's when we step up and we win 9-10 games in a year. So would this be the year the Redskins sneak up out of nowhere and win? Yeah, but have you seen the schedule? Have you seen the quarterbacks that we have to face? I can't say that this draft automatically puts you in a position where you feel like you're a contender for the division. Not with the way the Eagles roster looks, with the Eagles situation the way it is. The Giants had just as good, if not better, a draft than the Redskins did. You got to love what they did. And then you look at the Cowboys, and if not for Ezekiel Elliott getting suspended, they make the playoffs last year. They win 11, 12 games last year. Remember, they still won 9 games despite Ezekiel Elliott being suspended and going on like a 5-game losing streak without him. So just keep in mind that we're still probably the worst or the second worst team in our own division. We've got to make up some ground before we can start talking about that. So Jonas McConan says, last year we had 4 tight ends, Reed, Davis, Sprinkle, Paul. Also had 4 backs, Rob, Chris, Mack, and P. Ryan. And seeing how Paul is no longer a part of the team, Rob can take Paul's spot as a fullback. That's not exactly how it works. You never can construct a roster based off of what the team did the previous year because and we didn't have 4 backs make the roster last year. Remember, Mack got cut and he got picked up by the he might have made the roster. I take that back. I think we cut him during the season, and he ended up making the Vikings roster. They picked him up quickly. But in any event, I don't remember if Mack made it or not. But you can't say because last year we had 4 tight ends, we're going to have 4 tight ends this year. That's not how it works. Especially being that you got other positions that are better now. You may see it where they may take 6 corners where they only took 5 last year. They may keep 5 safeties where they only had 4 last year. That sort of thing. You never know where the balance will swing. They may have had 8 offensive linemen last year. They may go with 9 this year. You just never know. You don't know how it's going to fall. They may love a guy so much where they're like, man, we can't afford to put him on the practice squad. He won't pass through waivers. Someone else will pick him up. So we got to keep him on the roster. You never know how those things work out. So we'll see. RG3 hashtag says, I heard Geis was in a screaming match with the Eagles GM. That's been refuted. Their GM, Howie Roseman, came out and said that was false. That didn't happen. Ravens fan 25 says, what is your perspective on the Ravens draft and their future? You'll find that out when you watch the the draft wrap-up series on the Baltimore Ravens. James J says, Redskins have signed Sean Welch, listed as a center, not a guard. He can play all 3 of the interior positions. They're going to list him as a center because that's probably where he's most natural. But if you can play center, then you better be able to play guard too. That's just how it goes in this league. You don't generally stick around just because you can play center unless you're a damn good center. You better be able to play guard too if you want to stick around, especially if you're undrafted. He better be able to play all 3 of the interior positions or he won't make the roster. So they can have him listed as a center, but he better be able to play guard as well. Sean Mack says, BE only won because a roof fell on my dumb ass. I jest. He says, I jest. We all love B. Look forward to doing it again this upcoming season. Yeah, you were up there, man. And then you had a couple weeks where you had to take off, and that's where he made his power move there. Skinny Wild says, man, I know we ain't giving up the 3-4, but with Settle and Payne, don't you think it's worth sprinkling in some 4-3 from time to time? Well, we play a ton of nickel, which is an even front where you're going to have 4 defensive linemen. So, again, remember, we play nickel probably 60 to 65, maybe even 70, depending on the team we're playing, % of the time. So you're not going to be in your base defense as much as you are nickel, especially in today's day and age. And you look at the schedule that we're playing with all the quarterbacks, Andrew Luck, if he's healthy, Matt Ryan, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, those teams are throwing the football. You're going to be in nickel anyway, so we'll see what happens. Ree says, Vita Vea is posting pictures of food on his Instagram. I worried about this. Hope he can control his weight. He's a big guy, Ree. What'd you expect? He'll be fine. Let's see. Let's see what we got. Ree says, why was Equanimeous St. Brown drafted so low? I thought he was a 4th-round talent. You know him well. Figured you'd be best to ask. Like I said, the tape on him wasn't great because of the quarterback. It's just like those LSU wide receivers. They're so hard to figure out. Some people would argue that DJ Chark was better than a 3rd-round pick, which is where he went to Jacksonville. Or was it 2nd round? He might have been a 2nd-round pick. Don't get me the line. Let me check and see. I think Chark might have been a 2nd-round pick, but a late 2nd to Jacksonville. Yeah, he was. But in any event, what happens is that when you've got tape with bad quarterbacks, it's sometimes hard to decipher. Bottom line is, though, I don't want to make any excuses because DJ Moore's tape was tough because of his quarterbacking situation. He went in the 1st round, was the first receiver taken off the board. DJ Chark's tape at times was tough because of the quarterbacking situation. He goes in the 2nd round in Jacksonville. So I'm not going to make any excuses. He's still raw. Probably could have used another year of seasoning. But, again, at Notre Dame, where the quarterback position isn't great under Brian Kelly, and he yo-yos quarterbacks left and right, hard to get into any kind of rhythm. Teams just saw other players that gave them better value than Equanimeous St. Brown. But I like his combination of height, weight, and speed. I think he's got immense potential at the next level, and he may end up being a gem in this draft for the Packers. So we'll see. Redskins Pride says, am I the only one that doesn't love last year's Ryan Anderson pick? Seems like an underachiever to me. I think you're in the majority, not the minority there. Who have you talked to that loved that pick? I don't know of one person that endorsed that Ryan Anderson pick last year. You knew about my disdain about the pick. I did it on the air live as they made the pick. I told you how disgusted I was with the pick. And I hope he proves me wrong. But I didn't see anything on tape that screamed 2nd-round pick. As a matter of fact, he seems like one of the guys that ate off of the amount of talent that was around him. He didn't eat because he was good himself. He ate because of the talent around him. So I don't think that he's going to be that great of a pro. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. Let me reiterate that. I hope I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong. Sean Mack says, Phil Taylor ain't. I know, Sean. You tell me this every year. And you're right every year. We just want him to, we just want to see the man healthy. That's it. We know. Jonathan Adams says, do you think Geis will split time with Kelly, or will Geis assume the starting role? Sorry if I'm late. Sure, you probably discussed this. We did discuss it, but he wouldn't be splitting time with Kelly. He'd be splitting time with Pirine. I'd be shocked if Rob Kelly made the roster. Again, if the Redskins keep 4 backs, he'll be competing with 3 other backs for that final roster spot at the running back position. And we talked about it earlier, but since you weren't here, I'll quickly recap. It'd be, let me go back up because I forgot his name already. And my man Cloud helped me out earlier. Byron Marshall. So there we go. It'd be Byron Marshall, Rob Kelly, and Capri Bibbs would be your 3 guys that would be competing for that last spot. But Right now, the 3 locks on the Redskins roster at the running back position are Darius Geis, Chris Thompson, and Samaje Perine. Let's see. B3 says, Matty Ice, 5-year, $150 million, $100 million guaranteed thoughts. I'm going to talk about that on my podcast. So you want my thoughts about that, you're going to have to go and listen to the podcast. That should be dropping tomorrow. Let's see. RG3 hashtag says, I see Daron Payne as a smaller Dontari Poe. Nah. Dontari Poe was a wrecking ball coming out of Memphis. People likened our 5th round pick more so. And remember, Poe was 330 coming out of Memphis. Daron Payne is 311. The two aren't comparable. He's closer to Tim Settle than he is Daron Payne. But, again, we will see. But that seems to be all the comments. No heat on Twitter as I'm looking at Twitter right now. No one called in. So, that'll wrap it up, man. We'll discuss the Redskins draft. I'll probably be AWOL for a while as I'll be working on the rest of the drafts around football. But I'll come back and we'll talk Redskins news, especially if Bruce Allen decides to go. I'm surprised nobody brought that up tonight, but in any event, we'll have more to discuss later date and time. But it's been a long night, so I'll go ahead, glide to the side, let you get to bed, and I'll continue to grind away. I should have a new podcast out tomorrow, so you guys be on the lookout for that. And we'll get this draft wrap-up series underway here in the next week or so as we start hitting the ground running with these 2018 NFL drafts. I am a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. Redskins spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, hail to our beloved Washington Redskins. I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.
They don't pay us to think. They pay us to know. We know we can beat them. There's no excuses why we shouldn't. Win the game, period. W is on 3, man. Let's go. W on 3. 1, 2, 3. W.